a leftover woman. Now, when I said that, that might have offended you because you might have thought that's exactly how I think. I think there are leftover women and then versus the rest who are the most valued. And that would be far from the truth because the term is actually a term of a woman of a certain age in certain countries. In certain places, they actually have this as a way of describing a certain type of a woman. I'll give you this as a second thought.
What is really a leftover woman? Today I'm going to explain it to you. The leftover woman is a Chinese term, means a woman who is over 27-years-old but unmarried. There are many women who are too old to get married, or they are divorced and nobody wants to marry them. So the problem is that there are more and more leftover women in China and became already a social problem.
So in China, they are facing this thing where they turn to be a lot more women who are either getting old or who have passed a certain age limit for them, to a point where these women were now termed or thought of or spoken of within this term, leftover woman. And as you might have heard, the age is very, very low. The age for which they describe a leftover woman is a very, very low age. Now, if you go over to Wikipedia, which actually tells you what it is, you will see the word is Shen Yu or something like that, however you call it. These are leftover women, are women who remain unmarried in their later 20s. This is roughly about 28 going up. Yeah, when you think you're just stepping into your adult age, no, to them, they classify that as a leftover woman. There is a very huge stigma around this subject. Huge. There is a stigma around not being married to such a point that there are marketplaces. No, I don't think you heard me correctly.
Imagine you take a walk to the market, but instead of seeing fruit or vegetables, you see a market full of single women desperately looking for a partner. This is the reality for millions of people across China right now.
Yes, you heard that correctly. There are marketplaces now which are made for individuals who are not married, to a point where people or parents are actually going to extreme. There are parks in China. China is not doing so well. Y'all, oh my goodness. There are parks where adults sit there day in and day out trying to sell their kids for marriage. And it's making these unrealistic standards and so forth. And it's not just that. People get that, you get there and you listen to some of the questions that people are asking, it will tell you it's hectic out there. Yes, you saw that correctly. These are the kind of questions that they ask when you get to this particular so-called marriage marketplace in China. It's wild out there. Now, it creates a very funny scenario for me to even describe, because in one part of this entire marriage marketplace and so forth, there are agencies. Like in case you want to give your information and you can't sit there every day, or your parents can't sit there every day, there are agents who sit there and will show your information to people. And they'll sell this idea, oh no, he stays in the city, he stays where and whatnot. And in this entire whole huajes, it's an entire problem that they have. Now, in China, labels are a thing. Like very recently, I think I heard about another term called nowhere girls. This is a new term that I heard. I heard it today. That's very recent. I heard this term, nowhere girls. And the term nowhere girls describes like there's this huge number, millions of young girls who are not married, they don't have employment, they don't have education, they don't have any prospects, they are completely in an unfortunate and a hopeless situation. It describes, China has tagged these people. There is now even a term for them. There is a word that they even call them. The same way there is the word for the leftover women. They have a term for these women who do not have kids, who do not have money, no education, no prospects in life, and stuff like that. Now, to some parts, actually, they do realize this huge discrepancy of how some people's financial situation does not result into marriage. And so you go to places like Japan, they have actually now started with this whole app which they are trying to get young people interested in marriage. I saw the articles a little bit earlier on in June. They're encouraging people to get involved in this app so that they can find them partners. There are rules around it and whatnot. Can only interact with one person per time and so forth. It's not like these swipe dating sites and stuff like that. Now, there is even versions of this for the richer people, like the richer women in China who are looking for prospects. It's not just the poor ones. It's also the...
It's Valentine's Day in Chengdu, and preparations are well underway for an unusual event. A matchmaking party to find husbands for some of the city's single female millionaires.
Yes, even the millionaires are struggling to a point where they have now created a special event for them so that they can wedge out their options to finding someone. Now, why am I even taking all these topics? Because these are all different topics. It's that the nowhere girls, leftover women, marriage marketplaces, and all these things. Why am I bundling all of these things? Is this tagline, this whatever name they put on it? At the end of the day, our capability of creating meaningful relationships, it's very important. And unfortunately, with the state of the world, we're just completely declining in that. When the world became more connected, it became more disconnected in creating meaningful relationships. Like one of the things that you would, like one of the most beautiful verses in the Bible, away from all these taglines that people give themselves, it's Psalms chapter number 8. It says, when I behold your heavens and the works of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou care for him? God, when the psalmist was writing this, he's thinking there is this beauty about mankind, or this creature that God had created, that out of all the vast beauties of the world, this is what God has chosen much closer to him. He says, what is this creature that you have chosen? The world has many taglines. It has many taglines. They will find one for you. They'll call you skinny, they'll call you fat, they'll call you what. The world has many taglines. Now, you also can choose to hear that tagline and then walk with that tagline at the back of your head. Somebody says you are ugly. Now when you are now walking with ugly at the back of your head. There's a tagline for everything. You know, I remember when we grew up, there were people that you say, hey, this one is ugly. That was the first person to get married. I was the first person. You're like, what exactly were we saying when we said that person? I was like, because it tells you the world has a tag for everything. When we find the identity, which is the core root of this video, when we find the identity that we have from God, it's very much different from the ones that the world gives us. Rich people struggling to find marriages. Everybody thought, you know, I'm an independent this, I'm an independent this. They became so independent, they never built any meaningful relationships. Miss Independence, boss lady. To a point where the country has parks, entire parks, where people are going to find matchmakers. They're showing each other pictures. These are not kids, okay? Just to be very clear, you can see by the clips that I'm showing. This particular subject, you can go through an entire rabbit hole. This one of leftover women, you can go through an entire rabbit hole. I remember the day I found this topic the first time, I must have spent like 6 hours watching different videos, and I was like, what? Entire documentaries made to discuss this subject of these women who are struggling to find relationships at the later years of their, because their society is so rooted at labeling people. So it's important we remember to remind people of the values that the Bible has given them. If you think about Matthew chapter number 10, he talks about, you know, you see the beauties of the sparrows and so forth. And yet you are valued more than the sparrows. You're valued more than these plants that you see on the ground. The world taglines, labels, pushes to the side. But God shows us value, and that's the value that he wants us to walk with, because there's no telling. Someone is struggling from an issue that you didn't even know exists. Like right now, how many of you guys actually knew about this particular term, leftover women? And it just describes people that have passed the age of 27 going upwards before they actually got married. Identity means everything, you know, and that's why our identity in Christ is so important. And, you know, when I saw this article, it just went with it. Japan is literally pushing for young people to start dating so that they can push for the birth rate. It tells you when the government steps in, it's a problem. And where does it come from? All these things, all these labels, feminisms, what, all these things, independent, what? It pushes people apart. We end up so much obsessed with our own heads that we are not socializing. We lose so much time, and before you know it, we are regretting our decisions without saying we are regretting our decision. It's tricky. It's better to sometimes think you are not the most smartest in the room, because those that mostly tell themselves that find themselves in error and in grave danger. Look at all the people that ended up in cults. They thought they had it smart. Look at everybody that thought they could outsmart the Triple M system. Lost the biggest. People retired, put in money in there. Boom, the system. Sometimes it's best to hold back. While one thinks he's smart, sometimes just hold back. I've said that about marriages. When you see all these things about marriages that come out, people regretting the decisions they made. They've passed, they've passed the clock for marriage or for having kids, and then you start seeing the regret. You can't take it back. You thought you were God when you were making those decisions. You didn't realize that time will pass you that fast. Some of these decisions, when you make them, they roll over very quickly. It's Ricky. Y'all have a good one.